Now let us start with chapter number 36. That is wonderful stories of first two Goa gentlemen and second of Mrs. Aurangabadkar. This chapter relates the wonderful stories of two gentlemen from Goa and Mrs. Aurangabadkar of Solapur. So let's see the first story, which is about two gentlemen. Once, two gentlemen came from Goa for taking darshan of Sai Baba and prostrated themselves before him. Though both came together, Baba asked only one of them to give him rupees 15 as dakshina, which was paid willingly. The other man voluntarily offered rupees 35, which was rejected by Baba to the astonishment of all. Shama, who was present, asked Baba, "What is this? Both came together, one's dakshina you accept, the others, though voluntarily paid, you refuse. Why this discrimination?" Baba replied, "Shama, you knowing nothing. I take nothing from anybody. This masjid Bai, that is the presiding deity of the masjid, calls for the debt. The donor pays it and becomes free. Have I any home, property or family to look after? I require nothing. I am ever free. Debt, enmity and murder have to be atoned for as there is no escape from them." Baba then continued in his characteristic way as follows. At first he was a poor and took a vow to his God that he would pay his first month's salary if he got a job. He got one for rupees 15, then he steadily got promotions. From rupees 15 he got rupees 30, 60, 100, 200 and ultimately rupees 700. But in the prosperity, he forgot completely the vow he took. The force of his karma has driven him here and I asked that amount, that is rupees 15 from him as dakshina. Another story. While wandering by a seaside, I came to a huge mansion and sat in its veranda. The Brahmin owner gave me a good reception and fed me sumptuously. He showed me a neat and clean place near a cupboard for sleeping. I slept there. While I was sound asleep, the man removed the laterite slab and broke the wall, crept in and seized of all the money from my pocket. When I woke up, I found that rupees 30,000 were stolen. I was greatly distressed and sat weeping and mourning. The money was in currency notes and I thought that the Brahmin had stolen it. I lost all interest in food and drink and sat for a fortnight in the veranda bemoaning my loss. After the fortnight was over, a passing fakir saw me crying and made inquiries regarding the cause of my sorrows. I told him everything. He said, "If you act according to my bidding, you will recover your money. Go to a fakir, I shall give his whereabouts, surrender yourself to him, he will get your money back. In the meanwhile, give up your favorite food till you recover your money." I followed the fakir's advice and got my money. Then I went to the seashore where the steamer was standing, but I could not get into it as it was overcrowded. There a good-natured peon interceded for me and I got in luckily. That brought me to another shore from where I caught a train and came to Masjid Mai. The story finished and Baba asked Shama to take the guests and arrange for their feeding. Then Shama took them home and fed them. At dinner, Shama said to the guest that Baba's story was rather mysterious as he had never gone to a seaside, never had any money, that is rupees 30,000, never travelled, never lost any money and never recovered it and inquired from them whether they understood it and caught its significance. The guests were deeply moved and were shedding tears. In a choked voice, they said, "Baba and omniscient, infinite, the supreme one, that is Parabrahma," without a second. The story he gave out is exactly our story. What he spoke has already taken place in our case. How he knew this is a wonder of wonders. We shall give all the details after the meals. Then after the meals, while they were chewing bitter leaves, the guests began to tell their stories. One of them said, "A hill station on the Ghats, my native place, I went to Goa to earn my living by securing a job. I took a vow to God Datta that if I got a job, I would offer him my first month's salary. By His grace, I got a job of rupees 15 and then I got promotions as described by Baba. I did forget all about my woe. Baba had just reminded me of it in this way and recovered rupees 15 from me. It is not dakshina as one may think it to be, but a repayment of an old debt and fulfillment of long forgotten woe. And moral of this story is, in fact, Baba never begged for any money nor allowed his bhakta to beg. He regarded money as a danger or bar to spiritual progress and did not allow his bhakta to fall into its clutches. Bhagat Mahalsapati is an instance on this point. He was very poor and could hardly make both ends meet. Baba never allowed him to make any money nor gave him anything from the Dakshina collection. Once a kind and liberal merchant named Hansraj gave a large amount of money to Mahalsapati in Baba's presence, but Baba did not permit him to accept it. Then the second guest began to tell, "My Brahmin, that is cook, was serving me faithfully for 35 years. Unfortunately, he fell into bad ways, his mind changed, and he robbed me of my treasure. By removing a laterite slab from my wall where my cupboard is fixed, he came in while we were all deep asleep and carried away all my accumulated wealth, that is of 30,000 in currency notes." I know not how Baba mentioned the exact amount. I sat crying day and night. My inquiries came to nothing. I spent a fortnight in great anxiety. As I sat on the veranda, sad and dejected, a passing fakir saw my condition and inquired of its cause, and I told him all about it. He told me that an Avalia, that is Sant, by name Sai, lives in Shirdi, Kopargaon Taluka. Make vow to him and give up any food that you like best, and say to him mentally that I have given up eating that food till I take your darshan. Then I took the vow and gave up eating rice and said, "Baba, I will eat it after recovering my property and after taking your darshan." 15 days passed after this. The Brahmin of this own accord came to me, returned my money and apologized, saying, "I went mad and acted thus. I now place my head on your feet. Please forgive me." Thus everything ended well. The fakir that met me and helped me was not seen again. An intense desire to see Sai Baba, whom the fakir pointed out me, arose in my mind. I thought that the fakir who came all the way to my house was no other than Sai Baba. Would he who saw me and helped me to get my lost money ever covet rupees 35? On the contrary, without expecting anything from us, he always lead us on the path of spiritual progress. I was overjoyed when I recovered my stolen property, and being ignorant, I forgot all about my woe. Then, when I was at Kaluba one night, I saw Sai Baba in my dream. This reminded me of my promised visit to Shirdi. I went to Goa and from there wanted to start for Shirdi by taking a steamer to Mumbai en route. But when I came to the harbour, I found that the steamer was crowded and there was no place. The captain did not allow me, but on the intercession of a peon who was a stranger to me, I was allowed to get into the steamer which brought me to Mumbai. From there I came by train. Surely I think that Baba is all providing and all knowing. What are we and where is our home? How fortunate we are that Baba got our money back and drew us here to himself. Shirdi folks must be infinitely superior and more fortunate than we, for Baba has played, laughed, talked, and lived with you for so many years. I think that your store of good merits must be infinite. Sai is our Datta, that is Lord Dattatreya. He gave me a seat in a steamer and brought me here, and thus gave proof of his omniscience and omnipotence. And next story of this chapter is about Mrs. Aurangabadkar. A lady from Solapur, the wife of Sakharam Aurangabadkar, had no issue during the long period of 27 years. She had made a number of vows to gods and goddesses for an issue, but was not successful. She then became almost hopeless. To make a last attempt in this matter, she came to Shirdi with her stepson Vishwanath and stayed there for 2 months serving Baba. Whenever she went to the masjid, she found Baba surrounded by devotees. She wanted to see Baba alone, fall at his feet and open her heart and pray for an issue, but she did not get any suitable opportunity. Ultimately, she requested Shama to intercede with Baba for her when he was alone. Shama said to her that Baba's darbar was open still, he would try for her and that the Lord might bless her. He asked her to sit ready with a coconut and joss sticks in the open courtyard at the time of Baba's meals, and that when he beckoned to her, she should come up. One day after dinner, when Shama was wiping Baba's wet hands with a towel, the latter pinched Shama's cheek. Shama, feeling anger, said, Deva, is it proper for you to pinch me like this? We don't want such a mischievous God who pinches us thus. Are we your dependents? Is this the fruit of our intimacy? Baba replied, Oh Shama, during the 72 generations that you were with me, I never pinched you till now, and now you resent my touching you? Shama replied, I want a God who will always love us and give us new dishes to eat. We do not want any reward from you or heaven, etc. Let our faith unto your feet be ever awake. Baba, yes, I have indeed come for that. I have been feeding and nursing you and have got love and affection for you. Then Baba went up and took his seat. Shama beckoned to the lady. She came up, bowed down, and presented the coconut and joss sticks. Baba shook the coconut, which was dry. The kernel within rolled and made a noise. Baba said, Shama, this is rolling. See what it says. Shama, the woman prays that a child should similarly roll in her womb, so please give her the coconut with your blessings. Baba, will the coconut give her any issue? How foolish people are to fancy such things. Shama, I know the power of your words and blessings. Your word will give her a series of children. You are wrangling and not giving real blessings. The parley went on for a while. Baba repeatedly ordered to break the coconut and Shama pleaded for the gift of the entire fruit to the lady. Finally, Baba yielded and said, She will have an issue. When? Asked Shama. In 12 months was the reply. At this, the coconut was broken into two parts. One was eaten by the two, the another was given to the lady. Then Shama turned up to the lady and said, Dear lady, you are a witness to my words. If within 12 months you do not get any issue, I will break a coconut against this Deva's head and drive him out of this masjid. If I fail in this, I will not call myself Madhav. You will soon realize what I say. She delivered a son in a year's time, and the son was brought to Baba's in his 5th month. The couple, both husband and wife, prostrated themselves before Baba, and the grateful father, that is Mr. Aurangabadkar, paid a sum of rupees 500 which was spent in constructing a shed for Baba's horse, that is Shamakarna. And by this way, we have ended with this chapter. Both to Sri Sai, peace to be all. Now let's see the chapter number 37, that is of Saudi procession. In this chapter, Hemadpant, after making some preliminary observations on some points of Vedanta, described the Saudi procession. Preliminary. Blessed is Sai's life for his devotees. Blessed is his daily routine. His way and actions are indescribable. Sometimes he was intoxicated with Brahmananda, that is divine bliss, and at other times completely self-absorbed. While doing so many things at the same time, he was yet unconcerned with them. Though he seemed at times quite inactive, he was not idle or dozing. He always abided in his own self. Though he looked calm and placid as the sea, he was deep and unfathomable. Who can describe his ineffable nature? He regarded men as brothers, women as sisters and mothers. He was a perfect celibate, as everybody knows. May the knowledge we got in his company last long unto death. Let us ever serve him with wholehearted devotion to his feet. Let us see him, that is God, in all beings, and let us constantly remember his name. Hemadpant, after making some lengthy dissertations on some topics of Vedanta, which he himself considered as a digression, goes on to describe the Chaudi procession. And now let's see the point of Chaudi procession. Baba's dormitory has been already described. One day he slept in the masjid and on the next day in the Chaudi near the masjid. He slept in the masjid and in the Chaudi on alternate days. This alternate sleeping at both these places went on till Baba's Mahasamadhi. From 10 December 1909, devotees began to offer regular worship to Baba in the Chaudi. This we will now describe with His grace. When the day of retiring to the Chaudi came, people flocked to the masjid and did bhajan in the mandap, that is courtyard, for a few hours. Behind them was a beautiful palanquin, to the right a Tulsi Vrindavan, and in front Baba's adorned his seat. And there were the devotees singing bhajan. Men and women who had a liking for the bhajan came in time. Some took tal, chiplis, and kartal, mridanga, khanjiri, and ghol, that is all musical instruments, in their hands and conducted the bhajan. Sai Baba was the magnet who drew all the devotees to him. Outside in the open, some trimmed their dyutyas, that is torches, some decorated the palanquin, some stood with candlestick in their hand and held victory to Baba. The corners were decorated with buntings. In the masjid, rows of burning oil lamps shed their light. Baba's horse, that is Shamakarna, stood fully decorated outside. Then Tate Patil came with a group of men to Baba and asked him to be ready. Baba sat quiet in his place till Tata came and helped him to get up by putting his arm under Baba's arm. Tata called Baba by the name of Mama, that is maternal uncle. Really, their relationship was extremely intimate. Baba wore on his body the usual kafni, took his satka, that is short stick, under his armpit, and after taking his chilim, that is tobacco pipe and tobacco, and placing a cloth over his shoulder, became ready to start. Then Tata placed a golden embroidered beautiful chela, that is shawl, over his body. After this, Baba himself put a few fuel stick into the dhuni to keep it alive, and with his right hand extinguished the lamp burning near the dhuni, and then started for the Chaudi. Then all sorts of musical instruments, bands and horse, etc. gave out different sounds. And fireworks exhibited various colored views. Men and women singing Baba's name started walking doing the bhajan to the accompaniment of mridanga and veena. Some danced with joy and some carried various flags. The bhaldars announced Baba's name when he came on the steps of the masjid. On two sides of Baba stood persons who held chammers and others who fanned Baba. On the way were spread folds of cloth which Baba walked on, being supported by devotees' hand. Tata Patil held the left hand and the Mahasapati the right, and Bapu Sahib Jog held the chhatri, that is umbrella, over his head. In this fashion, Baba marched on to the Chaudi. The fully decorated horse named Shamakarna led the way, and behind him were all the carriers, waiters, music players, and the crowd of devotees. Harinama, the name of the Lord, was being chanted to the accompaniment of music, as also the name of Sai. In this manner, the procession reached the corner, and everyone who joined this party seemed pleased and delighted. On reaching this corner, Baba stood facing the Chaudi and shone with a peculiar aura. It seemed as if the face of Baba took over the glory of the rising sun. Baba stood there with a concentrated mind facing the north, as if he was signaling something. All the instruments played music while Baba moved his right hand up and down for some time. Kaka Sahib Dikshit at this time came forward with a silver plate containing flowers besmeared with gular, that is red powder, and threw them on Baba's body off and on. The musical instrument played their best. All this juncture and Baba's face beamed with radiance and beauty, and all the persons viewed this lustre to their heart content. Words fail to describe the splendor of this scene. Sometimes Marsapati began to dance as if possessed by some deity, but all were surprised to see that Baba's concentration was least disturbed. With a lantern in his hand, Tatya Patil walked on Baba's left side and Bhagat Mahasapati on the right, holding in his hand and hem of Baba's garment. What a beautiful procession and what an expansion of devotion! To witness this, men and women, poor and rich, flocked there. Baba walked at very slow pace. Bhaktas followed on both sides with love and devotion. With joy permeating the whole atmosphere of the place, the procession reached the Chowdi. Those days are gone now. Nobody can see them in future, but by remembering and visualizing that sight, we can bring solace and ecstasy to our mind. The Chowdi was also fully decorated with a good white ceiling, mirrors, and many sorts of lamps. On reaching there, Tatya went ahead and spread an asan, that is sit cushion, and placing a bolster, made Baba sit there and made him wear angarkha, that is coat. Then the devotees worshipped him in various ways. They put a crown on his head with a tuft above, placed garlands of flowers and jewels round his neck, and marking his forehead with musk mixed vertical lines, that is, a Vaishnava devotee do. They gazed at him for long to their heart's content. They changed his headdress now and then held it aloft on the head, fearing that Baba might throw it away. Baba knew what the Bhaktas wished for and meekly submitted to all their ways without objection. With these adornments, he looked wonderful and beautiful. Nana Sahib Nimunkar held the chhatra, that is state umbrella, with its beautiful pendants which moved in a circle with its surrounding stick. Bapu Sahib Jog washed his feet in a silver dish, offered arghya and worshipped with due rituals, then besmeared his arms with sandal paste and offered him tambul, that is bitter leaves. Baba sat on the asan, that is gadi, while Tatya and other kept standing. When Baba sat on the gadi, supporting himself against the bolster, devotees on both sides waved chamers and fans. Shama then prepared the chilim and handed it over to Tata Patil and drew a flame out of it by inhaling a deep breath through his mouth and then gave it to Baba. After Baba had his smoke, it was given to Bhagat Mahasapati and then it was passed round to all. Blessed was the inanimate chilim. It had first to undergo many ordeals of penance, such as being kneaded by pot makers, dried in the sun, and then burnt in fire, and then it had the good fortune to get the contact of Baba's hand and his kiss. After this function was over, devotees put garlands of flower around his neck and gave him scents and bunches of flower. Baba, who was an incarnation of dispassion, cared a fig for all these necklaces of jewels and garlands of flowers and other decorations, but out of real love to his devotees, he allowed them to go to have their own way and to please themselves. Finally, Bapu Sahib Jog waved the arti over Baba, observing all formalities, and the musical instruments played their auspicious tunes. When the arti was over, the devotees returned home, one by one saluting Baba and taking his leave. When Tata Patil, after offering chilim, attar, that is scent, a rose water, stood to depart, Baba said to him lovingly, "Guard me properly. Go if you like, but return sometimes at night and acquire for me." On replying in the affirmative, Tata Patil left the Chowdi and went home. Then Baba himself prepared his bed. He arranged some sheets upon another and thus making his bed went to rest. We shall also now take rest and close this chapter with a request to the readers that they should remember Baba and his Chowdi procession daily before they retire to go to bed. And by this way we have ended this chapter. Both to Sri Sai, peace to be all. Here is chapter number 38. In this chapter we are going to see first, that is Baba's handi, second, disrespect of shrine, third, kala or hojpoj, and fourth, cup of buttermilk. In the last chapter we describe Baba's Chowdi procession. In this we take up Baba's handi, that is cooking pot, and some other subjects. Preliminary. Oh, bless Sadguru Sai, we bow to you, who has given happiness to the whole world, accomplished the welfare of the devotees, and have removed the afflictions of those who have restored to your feet. By being very liberal and also being the protector and savior of the bhaktas who surrender themselves to you, you have incarnated yourself in this world to oblige mankind and do them good. The liquid essence of pure self was poured into the mold of Brahma, and out of this has come out the Christ jewel of the suns, that is Sai. This Sai is Atmaram himself. He is the abode of the perfect divine bliss. After having attained himself all objects of life, he made his devotees establish on the path. And now let's see the first point of this chapter, that is Baba's Handi. Different sadhanas, that is means of accomplishments, are prescribed in our scriptures for different ages. Tapa, that is penance, is recommended for Krita age. Dhyana, that is knowledge, for Trita age. Yajna, that is sacrifice, for Dwapar age. And Dan, that is charity, for Kali age, that is present age. Of all the charities, giving food is the best one. We are much perturbed when we get no food at noon. Other beings feel similarly under such circumstances. After knowing this, he who gives food to the poor and hungry is the best donor or charitable person. The Taittiriya Upanishad says that food is Brahma. From food all the creatures are born, and by food they live, and after having departed into food again they enter. When an Atithi, that is guest, comes to our door at noon, it is our duty to welcome him by giving him food. Other kinds of charities, that is giving away health, property and clothes, etc., require some discrimination, but in the matter of food, no such consideration is necessary. If anybody comes to our door at noon, he should be served forthwith. And if lame, crippled, blind and diseased person come, they should be fed first and be able-bodied person and our relations afterwards. The merit of feeding the former is much greater than that of feeding the latter. Other kinds of charities are imperfect without this annadan, donation of food. Just as stars without the moon, necklace without the pendant, crown without the pinnacle, pond without a lotus, bhajan without devotion, married lady without the kumkum mark, song without a sweet voice, or buttermilk without salt. Just as a varna, that is pearl soap, excels all other dishes, annadan is the best of all merits. Now let us see how Baba prepared food and distributed it to others. It has been stated before that Baba required very little food for himself, and whatever little he wanted and obtained it by begging from a few houses. But when he decided to distribute food to all, he made all preparations himself. He depended on nobody and troubled none in this matter. First he went to Bazar and bought all the things, corn, flour, spices, etc., paying cash. He also did the grinding. In the open courtyard of the masjid, he arranged a big hearth, and after lighting a fire, he kept a handi over it with a proper measure of water. There were two kinds of handis, one small and the other big. The former provided food for 50 persons, the latter for 100. Sometimes he cooked for mithe chawal, that is sweet rice, and at other times biryani with meat. At times, in the boiling varan, that is soup, he let in small balls of thick or flat bread of wheat flour. He grinded the spices on a stone slab and put the thin, pulverized spices into the cooking pot. He took all pains to make the dishes very palatable. He prepared ambil by boiling jawari flour in water and later mixing to it buttermilk, and then boiled both together. With the food, he distributed this ambil to all alike. To see whether the food was properly cooked or not, Baba rolled up the sleeve of his kafni and put his bare arm in the boiling cauldron without fear and churned, that is moved, the whole mass from side to side and up and down. There was no mark of burn on his arm nor fear on his face. When the cooking was over, Baba got the pots in the masjid and had them duly consecrated by the Maulvi, that is Muslim priest. First he sent part of the food as prasad to Mhalsapati and Tatya Patil, and then he served the remaining contents with his own hand to all the poor and helpless people to their heart's content. Really blessed and fortunate must be those people who got food prepared by Babas and served by him. Somebody may raise a point here and ask, did Baba distribute vegetarian and non-vegetarian food as prasad to all his devotees? The answer is plain and simple. Those who were accustomed to non-vegetarian food were given non-vegetarian food from the handi as prasad, and those who were not so accustomed were given vegetarian meal. He never created in them any wish or desire to indulge in this food. There is a principle that when a guru himself gives anything as prasad, the disciple who thinks and doubts whether it is acceptable or otherwise goes to perdition, that is, future miseries. In order to see whether any disciple has imbibed this principle, Baba at times put them to test. For instances, on a Ekadashi day, he gave some rupees to Dada Kelkar and asked him to go in person to Korala to get meat from there. This Dada Kelkar was an orthodox Brahmin and adhered to all orthodox manners in his life. He knew that offering wealth, grain, and clothes, etc., to a Sadguru was not enough, but that implicit obedience to him and prompt compliance with his order was the real dakshina that pleased him most. So Dada Kelkar dressed himself and started for the place. Then Baba called him back and said, "Don't go yourself, but send somebody." Then Dada sent his own servant Pandu for the purpose. When Baba saw him going, he asked Dada to call him back and cancel that program. On another occasion, Baba asked Dada just to see how the saltish, that is biryani mutton dish, was done. The latter replied casually that it was all right. Then Baba said to him, "Neither have you seen it with your eyes nor tasted it with your tongue, then how could you say that it was a good? Just take off the lid and see." While saying this, Baba caught his arm and thrust it into the pot and added, "Take some out of this, leaving aside your orthodox ways, and taste a little." When a wave of real love rises in a mother's mind, she pinches her child, and when he begins to cry, she hugs him close to her bosom. Similarly, Baba in a true motherly way pinched Dada Kelkar in this way. Really, no saint or guru will ever force his orthodox disciple to eat food forbidden in his religion. The handi business went on for some till 1910 and was stopped thereafter. As stated before, Das Ganu spread the fame of Baba by his kirtan far and wide in the Mumbai Presidency, and people from the part of the country began to flock to Shirdi, which became very soon a place of pilgrimage. The devotees brought with them various articles for presentation and offered various dishes of food as naivedya. The quantity of naivedya offered by them was so much that the fakirs and paupers could feed themselves to their heart's content, leaving some surplus behind. Before stating how naivedya was distributed, we shall refer to Nana Sahib Chandorkar's story showing Baba's regard for local shrines and deities. So let's see the story of Nana Sahib's disrespect of a shrine. By drawing inferences or gazing in their own way, some people said that Sahib was a Brahmin and some said that he was a Muslim. In reality, he belonged to no caste. No one knew definitely when he was born and in what community and who his parents were. Then how could be a Muslim or Brahmin? If he was a Muslim, how could he keep dhuni ever burning in the masjid? How could there be a Tulsi Vrindavan there? How could he allow the blowing of conches and ringing of bells? How could he allow all the different forms of Hindu worship there? Had he been a Muslim, could he have ears pressed and could he have spent money from his pocket for repairing Hindu temples? On the contrary, he never tolerated and slightest disrespect to shrines and deities. Once Nana Sahib Chandorkar came to Shirdi with his sadhu, husband of his wife's sister, that is Mr. Binawli. When they went to the masjid and sat before Baba, the latter suddenly got angry with Nana Sahib and said, "You have been so long in my company, then why do you behave like this?" Nana Sahib at first did not understand anything and humbly requested Baba to explain. Baba asked him when did he come to Kopargaon and how he came to Shirdi from there. Nana Sahib then at once realized his mistake. He usually worshipped the shrine of Datta on the banks of the Godavari at Kopargaon on his way to Shirdi, but this time he dissuaded his relative, who was a Datta Bhakta, from going to that shrine in order to avoid delay and drove straight. He confessed all this to Baba and told him that while bathing in the Godavari, a big thorn went into his foot and gave him much trouble. Baba said that was a slight punishment he met and warned him to be more careful in future. Next story is about Kala, that is the Hoj-Poj. To revert to the distribution of the Naivedya, after the Aarti was over and after Baba sent away the people with Udi and blessings, he went inside and sat behind a curtain with his back to the Nimbar for meals. With 2 rows of the intimate devotees, one on each side, the Bhaktas brought Naivedya containing a variety of foods such as puris, mande, polis, basundi, sanza, fine rice, etc., and kept waiting outside for prasad consecrated by Baba. All the foods were mixed in a hoj-poj and placed before Baba. He offered it to God and consecrated it. Then portions of the same were given to the persons waiting outside, and the rest was served to the group of devotees inside with Baba at the center. The Bhaktas sitting in 2 rows then dined to their heart's content. Baba asked Shama and Nana Sahib Nimonkar daily to serve the consecrated food to all persons sitting inside and look to their individual needs and comforts. This they did very carefully and willingly. Every morsel of the food thus partaken gave them fulfillment and satisfaction. Such sweet, lovely, and consecrated food it was, ever auspicious and ever holy. And the last story of this chapter is Cup of Buttermilk. Once Hemad Pant had eaten to his full capacity in this company when Baba offered him a cup of buttermilk. Its white appearance pleased him, but there was no space for it. He, however, took only a sip. On seeing his faltering attitude, Baba said, "Drink it all, you won't get any such opportunity hereafter." He drank it off then and found that Baba's words were prophetic, for he passed away after a brief period. Now, readers, we have certainly to thank Hemad Pant. He drank a cup of buttermilk but has supplied us with a sufficient quantity of nectar in the form of Baba's Leela. Let us drink this nectar to our heart's content and be satisfied and happy. And by this way, we are done with this chapter. Both to Sri Sai, peace to be all. And here is the chapter number 39, which is about Baba's knowledge of Sanskrit. In this chapter, we are going to see his interpretation of a verse from Gita and construction of the Samadhi Mandir. Before starting the chapter, here is the note given that this chapter 39 deals with Baba's interpretation of a verse from the Bhagavad Gita. As some people believed that Baba had little knowledge of Sanskrit, but by the interpretation of Nana Sahib Chandorkar's query, Hemad Pant refuted that charge in chapter number 50. And as it deals with the same subject matter, it is incorporated in this chapter. So let's start. Preliminary. Blessed is Shirdi and blessed is Dwarkamai, where Sri Sai lived and moved until he took Mahasamadhi. Blessed are the people of Shirdi, whom he obliged and for whom he lived there. Shirdi was a small village first, but it attained importance on account of his contact and became a tirtha, holy place of pilgrimage. Equally blessed are the women folk of Shirdi, blessed is their whole and undivided faith in him. They sang the glories of Baba while bathing, grinding, pounding corn, and doing other household works. So now, let's see the first point of this chapter, that is Baba's interpretation. Nobody believed that Baba knew Sanskrit. One day he surprised all by giving an interpretation of a verse from the Gita to Nana Sahib Chandorkar. A brief account about this matter was written by Mr. B.V. Dev, retired Mamlatdar, and published in Marathi in Sri Sai Leela magazine. Sphuta Vishaya, page number 563. Short accounts of the same are also published in Sai Baba's Chatters and Saying, page 61, and in the Wondrous Saint Sai Baba, page 36, both by B.V. Narasimha Swami, Mr. B.V. Dev has also given an English version of this in his statement dated 27/9/1936 and published on page 66 of Devotees' Experiences, that is part 3 by Narsimha Swami. As Mr. Dev has got first-hand information about this subject from Nana Sahib himself, we give below his version. Nana Sahib Chandorkar was a good student of Vedanta. He had read Gita with commentaries. He fancied that Baba knew nothing of Sanskrit text, so Baba one day pricked the bubble. There were the days before crowds flocked to Baba when Baba had individual meetings at the mosque with such devotees. Nana was sitting near Baba and massaging his legs and muttering something under his breath. And now here is the conversation between Baba and Nana. So first Baba says, "Nana, what are you mumbling to yourself?" Nana, "I am reciting a shloka, that is verse." Baba, "What shloka?" Nana, "From Bhagavad Gita." Baba, "Say it loudly." Nana then recited, which is as follows. तद्विद्धि प्रणिपातेन परिप्रश्नेन सेवया उपदेशन्ति ते ज्ञानं ज्ञानिनस्तत्त्वदर्शिनः. The conversation continued and Baba said, "Nana, do you understand it?" Nana, "Yes." Baba, "If you do, then tell me its meaning." Nana, "It means this: making Sashtanga Namaskar, that is prostration, asking the Guru, serving him, learn what this knowledge is. Then those who have attained the real knowledge of the Sadvastu, that is Brahma, will give you Upadesh, that is instruction of knowledge." Baba, "Nana, I do not want this sort of collected purport of the whole stanza. Give me each word, its grammatical force and meaning." Then Nana explained it word by word. Baba, "Nana, is it enough to merely make prostration?" Nana, "I do not know any other meaning for the word pranipat than making prostration." Baba, "What is pariprashna?" Nana, asking question. Baba, "What does prashna mean?" Nana, "The same, questioning." Baba, "If pariprashna means the same as prashna, that is question, why did Vyasa add the prefix pari? Was Vyasa off his head?" Nana, "I do not know of any other meaning for the word pariprashna." Baba, "Seva, what sort of seva is meant?" Nana, "Just what we are doing to you." Baba, "Is it enough to render such service?" Nana, "I do not know what more is signified by the word seva." Baba, in the next line, Upadeksha kanti te jnanam, can you read any other word in lieu of jnanam? Nana, yes. Baba, what word? Nana, agyanam. Baba, taking that word instead of jnan, is any meaning made out of these words? Nana, no, Shankara Bhyasa gives no such constructions. Baba, never mind, if he does not, is there any objection in using the word agyan if it gives a better sense? Nana, I do not understand how to construe by placing agyan in it. Baba, why does Krishna refer Arjuna to Tattvadarshis to do his prostration, interrogation and service? Why not Krishna, a Tattvadarshi, in fact Jnana itself? Nana, yes, he was, but I do not make out why he referred Arjun to Jnanis. Baba, have you not understood this? Nana was humiliated, his pride was knocked down, then Baba began to explain. First, it is not enough merely to prostrate before the Jnanis. We must make Sarvasva Sharanangati, that is complete surrender to the Sadguru. Second, mere questioning is not enough. The question must be not made with any improper motive or attitude or to trap the Guru and catch mistake in the answer or out of ideal curiosity. It must be earnest with a view to achieve spiritual progress or liberation. Third, Seva is not rendering service with the feeling that one is free to offer or refuse service. One must feel that he is not the master of the body, that the body is Guru and exists merely to render service to him. If this is done, the Sadguru will show you what the knowledge referred to in the previous stanza is. Nana did not understand what is meant by saying that a guru teaches Agnan. Baba says, how is Gyan Upadesh, that is, imparting of realization, to be effected? Destroying ignorance is Gnan. Of verse, that is OV 1396 of Jnaneshwari commenting on Gita 18 to 66 says, removal of ignorance is, O Arjun, if dream and sleep disappear, you are yourself. It is like that. Also, OV 83 on Gita verses 16 says, is there anything different or independent in Jnana beside the destruction of ignorance? Expelling darkness means light. Destroying duality means Dvaitya, means non-duality, that is Advaitya. Whenever we speak of destroying Dvaitya, we speak of Advaitya. Whenever we talk of destroying darkness, we talk of light. If we have to realize the Advaitya state, the feeling of Dvaitya in ourselves has to be removed. That is the realization of the Advaitya state. Who can speak of Advaitya while remaining in Dvaitya state unless one gets into the state of non-duality? How can one know it and realize it? Again, the Shishya, that is disciple, like the Sadguru, is the embodiment of Jnana. The difference between the two lies in the attitude, high realization of Sadguru and his marvelous superhuman sattva, that is beingness, and unrivaled capacity and Aishwarya Yoga, that is divine powers. This Sadguru is Nirgun, that is Satachita Ananda. He has indeed taken human form to elevate mankind and raise the world. But his real Nirgun nature is not destroyed thereby even a bit. His existence, that is, or reality, divine power and wisdom remain undiminished. The disciple also is in fact of the same Swarupa. But if it is overlaid by the effect of the sanskars of innumerable birth in the shape of ignorance, which wells his views that he is Suddha Chaitanya. As stated therein, he gets the impressions, that is, I am Jiva, a creature, meek and poor. The Guru has to root out these offshoots of ignorance and has to give Upadesh or instruction. To the disciples held spellbound for endless generations by the ideas of his being a Jiva, the Guru imparts the teachings. You are God, you are mighty and opulent. Then he realizes that he is God really. The perpetual delusion under which the disciple is laboring, that he is the body, that he is the creature, that is Jiva, or ego, that God, Paramatma and the world are different from him, is an ignorance inherited from innumerable past births. From actions based on it, he has derived his joy, sorrows and mixtures of both. To remove this delusion, this error, this root ignorance, he must start the inquiry. How did the ignorance arise? Where is it? And to show him, this is called the Guru's Upadesh. The following are the instances of Agyan. First, I am a Jiva, that is creator. Second, body is the soul, that is, I am the body. Third, God, world and Jiva are different. Fourth, I am not God. Fifth, not knowing that body is not the soul. And sixth, not knowing that God, world and Jiva are one. Unless these errors are exposed to his views, the disciple cannot learn what is God, Jiva, world, body, how they are interrelated and whether they are different from each other or are one and the same. To teach him this and destroy his ignorance is the instruction in Jnana or Ajnana. Why should Jnana be imparted to the Jiva, who is a Jnana Murti? Upadesh is merely to show him his error and destroy his ignorance. Baba added, that is, first, Pranipata implies complete surrender. Second, surrender must be of body, mind and wealth. Third, why should Krishna refer to other jnanis? So the Bhakta takes everything to be Vasudev. Any Guru would be Krishna to the devotee and Guru takes disciple to be Vasudev. as Sri Krishna knows that there are such gurus and disciples. He refers Arjuna to them so that their greatness be known. And the next point of this chapter, that is the last point of this chapter, construction of the Samadhi Mandir. Baba never made any fuss about things which he wanted to accomplish, but he so skillfully arranged the circumstances that the people were surprised at the slow but sure results attained. The construction of the Samadhi Mandir is an instance. Shriman Bapu Sahib Bhutti, the famous multimillionaire of Nagpur, lived in Shirdi with his family. Once an idea arose in his mind that he should have a building of his own there. Sometimes after this, while he was sleeping in Dikshit Wada, he got a vision. Baba appeared in his dream and ordered him to build a Wada with a temple. Shama, who was sleeping there, also got a similar vision. When Bapu Sahib awoke, he saw Shama crying and asked the latter as to why he was in tears. Shama replied that in his vision, Baba came to him and ordered distinctly, "Build the Vada with the temple. I shall fulfill the desires of all." On hearing the sweet and loving words of Baba, I was overpowered with emotion, my throat was choked, my eyes were overflowing with tears, and I began to cry. Bapu Sahib was surprised to see that both their vision tallied. Being a rich and capable man, he decided to build a Vada there and drew up a plan with Shama, that is Madhav Rao. Kaka Sahib Dikshit also approved of it, and when it was placed before Baba, he also sanctioned it immediately. Then the construction work was duly started, and under the supervision of Shama, the ground floor, the cellar, and the well were completed. Baba, on his way to and from Lendi, also suggested some improvements. Further work was entrusted to Baba Sahib Jog, and when it was going on, an idea struck Bapu Sahib Bhutti's mind that there should be an open space or platform, and in the center the image of Murlidhar, that is Lord Krishna with the flute, be installed. He asked Shama to refer this matter to Baba and get his consent. The latter asked Baba about this when he was just passing by the Vada. On hearing Shama, Baba gave his consent, saying, "After the temple is complete, I will come there to stay." And staring at the Vada, he added, "After the Vada is complete, he shall use it ourselves. We shall live, move, and play there, embrace each other, and be happy." Then Shama asked Baba whether this was the auspicious time to begin the foundation work of the central room of the shrine. Baba answered in the affirmative. Then Shama got a coconut broken there and started the work. In due time the work was completed, and an order was also placed for making a good image of Murlidhar. But before it was ready, a new situation turned up. Baba became seriously ill. Bapu Sahib became very sad and dejected, thinking that if Baba passed away, his Vada would not be consecrated by the holy touch of Baba's feet, and all his money, that is about 1,00,000 of rupees, will be wasted away. But the words, "Keep me in the Vada," which came out of Baba's mouth just before his passing away, consoled not only Bapu Sahib but one and all. In due time, Baba's holy body was placed and preserved in the central shrine meant for Murlidhar, and Baba himself became Murlidhar, and the Vada thus became the Samadhi Mandir of Sai Baba. This wonderful Leela is unfathomable. Blessed and fortunate is the Bapu Sahib Bhutti in whose Vadas lies the holy and the pure body of Baba. And by this way, we are done with this chapter. Both to Sri Sai, peace to be all. Let's move towards chapter number 14, that is Stories of Baba. First story is of attending Mrs. Dev Udyapan ceremony as a sannyasi with 2 others. Second story is of visiting Hemad Pant's house in the form of his picture. In this chapter, we give the 2 stories. First is of how Baba attended the Udyapan ceremony organized by Mr. B.V. Dev's mother at his house at Dahanu, and second one, how Baba attended the Shimga dinner party in Hemad Pant's house at Bandra. Preliminary. Blessed is Sri Sai Samartha, who gives instructions in the both temporal and spiritual matters to his devotees and makes them happy by enabling them to achieve the goal of their life. Sai, when places his hand over their head, transfer his powers to them, and thus destroying the sense of differentiation, makes them attain the unattainable thing. He who embraces the bhakti, who prostrate themselves before him with no sense of duality or differentiation, he becomes one with the bhaktas and the sea with the rivers. Now, to revert to the stories of this chapter. First story, that is of Mrs. Dev's Udyapan ceremony. Mr. B.V. Dev was a Mamlatdar at Dahanu, that is Thana district. His mother had observed 25 or 30 religious vows and a Udyapan, that is concluding ceremony. In connection therewith was to be performed. This ceremony included the feeding of 100 or 200 Brahmins. Mr. Dev fixed a date for the ceremony and wrote a letter to Bapu Sahib Jog asking him to request Sai Baba on his behalf to attend the dinner of the ceremony, as without his presence the ceremony would not be duly completed. Bapu Sahib Jog read out the letter to Baba. Baba noted carefully the pure-hearted invitation and said, I always think of him who remembers me. I require no conveyance, carriage, tanga, train, or aeroplane. I manifest myself to him who lovingly calls me. Write to him a reply that three of us, that is the trio, myself, yourself, and a third person will go and attend it. Mr. Jog informed Mr. Dev of what Baba said. Mr. Dev was much pleased, but he knew that Baba never went to any place except Rahata, Rui, and Nimgaon in person. He also thought that nothing was impossible for Baba, as he was all-pervading, and that he might suddenly come in any form and fulfill his words. A few days before this, a sannyasi in Bengali dress and professing to work for the cause of the protection of the cows came to the station master at Dahanu to collect donations. The station master told him to go into the town and see the Mamlatdar, that is Mr. Dev, and with his help collect funds. Just then the Mamlatdar happened to come there. The station master then introduced the sannyasi to him. Both sat talking on the platform. Mr. Dev told him that a subscription list for some other charitable cause had already been prepared by the leading citizen, Rao Sahib Narottam Shetty, and so it was not proper to start another subscription list, and that it would be better if he would visit the place after 2 or 4 months. Hearing this, the sannyasi left the place. About a month afterwards, the sannyasi came in a tanga. We stopped in front of Mr. Dev's house at about 10 a.m. Dev thought that he came for donations. On seeing him busy with the preparations of the ceremony, the sannyasi said that he had come not for money but for meals. Dev said, All right, you are welcome in the house. The sannyasi said, 2 lads are with me. Dev said, Well, come with them. As there was about 2 hours for the meals to be served, Dev inquired where he should send for them. He said that it was not necessary, as he could come himself at an appointed time. Dev asked him to come at noon. Exactly at 12 noon, the trio came, joined the party, and after feeding themselves went away. After the ceremony was finished, Dev wrote a letter to Bapu Sahib Jog complaining of Baba's breach of promise. Jog went to Baba with the letter, but before it was opened, Baba spoke. He says that I promised him to come, but devised him. Tell him that I did attend his dinner with 2 others, but he failed to recognize me. Then why did he call me at all? He thought that the sannyasi came to ask for subscription money. Did I not remove his doubt in that respect? And did I not say that I would come with 2 others, and did not the trio come in time and have their meals? See, to keep my words, I would sacrifice my life. I would never be untrue to my words. This reply pleased Jog's heart, and he communicated the whole reply to Dev. As soon as he read it, he burst into tears of joy, but he took himself to task mentally for vainly blaming Baba. He wondered how he was devised by the sannyasis prior visiting and his coming to him for subscription, how he also failed to catch the significance of the sannyasi's word that he would come with the two other for meals. This story clearly shows that when the devotees surrender themselves completely to their Sadguru, he sees to it that the religious functions in their houses are duly executed and compiled with all the necessary formalities. And now let's see the last story of this chapter, that is Hemadpant's Shimga dinner. Now let us take another story which shows how Baba appeared in the form of his picture and fulfilled the desire of his devotee. In 1917, on the morning of full moon day, Hemadpant had a vision. Baba appeared to him in his dream in the form of a well-dressed sannyasi, woke him up and said that he would come to him for meals that day. The vision constituted a part of dream. When he fully woke up, he saw neither Sai nor any sannyasi. But when he began to recollect the dream, he remembered each and every word of sannyasi uttered in his dream. Though he was in contact with Baba for 7 years and always meditated on Baba, he never expected that Baba would come to his house for meals. However, being much pleased with Baba's words, he went to his wife and informed her that being the holy day, a sannyasi was coming for meals and that some more rice should be prepared. She inquired about the guest, who he was and where he was coming from. Then, not to cause any misunderstanding, he gave her the truth and told her about the dream. She doubtingly asked whether it was possible that Baba should come there, that is Bandra from Shirdi, leaving the dainty dishes there to accept their coarse food. Hemadpant then assured her that Baba might not come in person, but he might attend in the form of a guest and that they would lose nothing if they cooked some more rice. After this, preparations for the dinner went on and it was ready at noon. The Holika worship was through and the leaves were spread and arranged with rangoli around them. 2 rows were arranged with a central seat between them for the honorable guest. All members of the family, that is sons, grandsons, daughters and son-in-law, etc., came and occupied their seats and the serving of the various items commenced. While this was being done, everybody was watching for the guest, but none turned up, though it was past noon. Then the entrance was closed, the Anna Shuddhi, that is ghee, was served. This was a signal to start eating. Formal offering to the Vishwadeva, that is fire, and Naivedya to Sri Krishna were also over and members were about to begin when footsteps in the staircase were heard distinctly. Hemadpant went immediately and opened the door and saw 2 men there. First, that is Ali Muhammad, and second, Maulana Ismu Muzawar. These 2 persons, seeing that meals were laid out and all the members were about to begin eating, apologized to Hemadpant and requested him to excuse their interference. They said, "You left your seat and came running to us. Others are waiting for you, so please take these things and I shall relate all about it later at your convenience." Saying so, he took out from under his arm a packet wrapped in an old newspaper and placed it on the table. Hemadpant uncovered the packet and saw, to his great wonder and pleasant surprise, a big and nice picture of Sai Baba. On seeing it, he was much moved, tears ran down from his eyes, and hair stood on the end all over his body, and he bent and placed his head on the feet of Baba in the picture. He thought that Baba had blessed him by this miracle or Leela. Out of curiosity, he asked Ali Muhammad how he got this picture. He said that he bought it from a shop and that he would give all the details about it afterwards, and wished that as all the members were waiting for him, he should go and join them. Hemadpant thanked him, bade them goodbye and returned to the dining hall. The picture was placed on the central seat reserved for the guest, and after making the due offering of the Naivedya, the whole party commenced eating and finished it in proper time. On seeing the beautiful form of Sai in the picture, everybody was extremely pleased and wondered how all this happened. This is how Sai Baba fulfilled his words uttered by him in the dream of Hemadpant. The story of the picture with all its detail, that is How Ali Muhammad got it, why he bought it and gave it to Hemadpant is reserved for the next chapter. And by this way, we are done with this chapter. Both to Sri Sai, peace to be all. And now let's see chapter number 41, Story of the Picture, Stealing the Rags and Reading of Naneshwari. As stated in the last chapter, we continued here the story of the picture. 9 years after the incident described in the last chapter, Ali Muhammad met Hemadpant again and related to him the following story. One day while wandering in the streets of Mumbai, he bought the picture from the street hawker. Then he got it framed and set it on the wall in his house at Bandra, that is suburb of Mumbai. As he loved Baba, daily he took darshan of it. 3 months before he gave the picture to Hemadpant, he was suffering from an abscess or swelling on his legs, for which an operation was performed, and he was convalescing in the house of his brother-in-law, Mr. Nur Mohammed Pirbhoi in Mumbai. For 3 months, his house in Bandra was closed and nobody was living there. Only the pictures of the Baba Abdul Rahman, Maulana Sahib Muhammad Hussain, Sai Baba, Baba Tujaddin, and a few other saints were there. The wheel of time did not even spare this. He was lying sick and was suffering in Mumbai. Why should the pictures suffer there, that is in Bandra? All the pictures met their end, but how Sai Baba's picture accept it? Nobody had been able to explain to me up till now. It shows the all-pervasiveness, omnipresence of Sai and his inscrutable power. The story goes like this. He had small picture of Saint Baba Abdul Rahman from Muhammad Hussain Thariyatopan many years ago. He gave it to his brother-in-law Nur Mohammed Pirbhoi, and it was lying on his table for 8 years. Once, Pirbhoi took it to a photographer and got it enlarged to life size and distributed copies of the same amongst his relation and friends, including Ali Muhammad, who fixed it up in Pandra's house. Nur Muhammad was a disciple of Saint Abdul Rahman, and when he went to present the picture to his guru in an open darbar held by him, the guru got wild and ran to beat him and drove him out. He felt sorry and dejected. He also thought that he spent so much of money and incurred his guru displeasure and warmth, as his guru, Baba Abdul Rahman, did not like image worship. He took the enlarged picture of Baba Rahman with him to Apollo Bunder, and after hiring a boat, took it and immersed it in the sea. He requested the friends and relations to return their copies, and after getting them back, had them immersed in Bandra Sea. At this time, Ali Muhammad was in his brother-in-law house. He was told by him that his suffering would come to an end if he would soon immerse the picture of the other saints also in the sea. On hearing this, Ali Muhammad sent Mehta, that is his manager, to his Bandra's house and got all the pictures of the saints in the house to be thrown into the sea. When Ali Muhammad returned home after 2 months, he was surprised to find Sai Baba's picture on the wall as before. He did not understand how Mehta took away all the pictures except this. He immediately took it out and kept it in his cupboard, fearing that if his brother-in-law saw it, he would do away with it. While he was thinking how it should be disposed of and who would keep it with care, Sai Baba himself, as it were, suggested to him that he should see and consult Maulana Ismu Muzawar and abide by his opinion. He met the Maulana and told him everything. After much consultation, they both decided that the picture should be presented to Anna Sahib, that is Hemadpant, and that he would protect it well. Then they both went to Hemadpant and presented him the picture in the nick of time. This story shows how Baba knew all past, present and future, and how skillfully he pulled the wires and fulfilled desires of his devotees. The following story shows that Baba liked very much those who took real interest in spiritual matters, and that he removed all their difficulties and made them happy. So here is the story, that is of stealing the rags and reading of Naneshwari. Mr. B.V. Dev, who was Mamlatdar of Dahanu, that is Thana district, wished for a long time to read Naneshwari. that is, the well known Marathi commentary on the Bhagavad Gita by Jnaneshwar, along with other scriptures. He could read daily one chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, but when he took Jnaneshwari in hand, some difficulties cropped up and he was precluded from reading it. He took 3 months' leave, went to Shirdi, and thence to his home at Pout for rest. He could read other books there, but when he opened Jnaneshwari, some evil or stray thoughts came crowding up in his mind and stopped him in the effort. Try as much as he could, he was not able to read even a few lines of the book with ease. So he resolved in his mind that when Baba would create love for the book and would order him to read it, he would begin, and not till then. Then, in the month of February, that is 1914th year, he went with his family to Shirdi. There, Jog asked him whether he reads Jnaneshwari daily. Dev replied that he was desirous of reading it, but he was not successful, and that only when Baba would order him to read it, he would commence. Jog then advised him to take a copy of the book and present it to Baba and start the reading after it was consecrated and written by him. Dev replied that he did not want to resort to this advice as Baba knows his heart. Would he not know his desire and satisfy it by giving him a clear order to read? Dev then saw Baba and offered 1 rupee as dakshina. Baba asked for rupees 20, which he gave. At night he met one Balak Ram and inquired from him as to how he secured Baba's devotion and grace. Balak Ram told him that he would communicate everything next day after Aarti. When they went for darshan the next day, Baba asked for rupees 20, which he gave willingly. As the masjid was crowded, they went aside and sat in a corner. Baba asked him to come closer and sit with a calm mind, which Dev did. Then after the noon aarti was over and the men dispersed, Dev saw Balakram again and asked him his previous experiences, what Baba told him and how he was taught meditation. While Balakram was going to reply, Baba sent one Chandru, a leper devotee, to call Dev to him. When Dev went to Baba, the latter asked him with whom and what he was talking. He said that he was with Balakram and heard from him his fame. Then Baba asked again rupees 25 as dakshina, which Dev gladly gave. Then Baba took him inside and sitting near the post charged him, saying, "You stole away my rags without my knowledge." Dev denied any knowledge of the rags, but Baba asked him to make a search. He searched but found none. Then Baba got angry and said, "There is nobody here. You are the only thief. Grey-haired and old, you came here for stealing." After this, Baba lost his temper, got terribly wild, gave all sorts of abuses and scoldings. Dev remained silent and apprehended that he might get a beating also. After about an hour or so, Baba asked him to go to the Wada. He returned to the Wada and told Jog and Balakram all that had happened. Then in the afternoon, Baba sent from all of them and said that his words might have pained the old man, that is Dev, but as he committed the theft, he took him to task. Then Baba asked again for rupees 12. Dev collected the amount, paid it, and prostrated himself before him. Then Baba said to him, "Go on reading the Pothi, that is Jnaneshwari, daily. Go and sit in the Vada, read regularly every day, and while reading, explain the portion, read to all with love and devotion. I am sitting here, ready to give you the whole gold embroidered shela, that is valuable shawl. Then why go to others to steal rags? And why you should get into the habit of stealing?" Dev was much pleased to hear the words of Baba, for he directly asked him to start reading Pothi, that is Jnaneshwari. He thought that he got what he wanted and that he could read the book with ease thenceforth. He again prostrated himself before Baba and said that he surrendered himself to him and that he should be treated as a child and be helped in his reading. He realized then what Baba meant by stealing the rags. What he asked Balakram constituted the rags, and Baba did not like his behavior in this respect. as he was ready to answer all his questions. He did not like him to ask others and make unnecessary enquiries, and therefore he scolded him. Dev thought that he really did not scold him, but thought that he was ready to fulfill his desire, and there was no use asking others in vain. Dev took these scoldings as blessings and went home satisfied and contented. The matter did not end here. Baba did not stop with only issuing an order to read. Within a year, he went to Dev and inquired about his progress. On 2nd April 1914, on Thursday morning, Baba gave him a dream. He sat on the upper floor and asked him whether he understood the pothi. No, answered Dev. Baba said, then when are you going to understand? Dev burst into tears and said, unless you shower your grace, the reading is merry burden and the understanding is still more difficult. Baba told, while reading, you make haste, read it before me, in my presence. Dev asked, what shall I read? Baba said, read Adhyatma, that is spiritualism. Dev went in to bring the book. When he opened his eyes, he was fully awakened. We leave the readers to imagine what ineffable joy and bliss Dev felt after this vision. And by this way, we are done with this chapter. Both to Sri Sai, peace to be all. And now, let's move towards chapter number 42, which is a little bit emotional kind of. The chapter is about Baba's passing away. In this chapter, we are going to see that its first point is about previous indications. Second, averting death of Ramachandra Dada Patil and Tatya Kotte Patil. Third, charity of Lakshmi Bai Shinde. And fourth, last moment. This chapter describes the passing away of Baba. Preliminary. The story given in the previous chapter have shown that the light of Guru's grace removes fear of mundane existence, opens the path of salvation and turns our miseries into happiness. If we always remember the feet of Sadguru, our troubles come to an end, death loses its sting, and the misery of this mundane existence is obliterated. Therefore, those who care for their welfare should carefully listen to the stories of Sai Samartha, which will purify their minds. In the beginning, Hemadpant dwells on Dr. Pandit's worship and he is marking Baba's forehead with tripunda, that is 3 horizontal lines. But as this has been already described in chapter 9th, it has been omitted here. So, first point of this chapter is previous indication. The readers up till now heard the stories of Baba's life. Let them now hear attentively of Baba's passing away. Baba got a slight fever on 28 September 1918. The fever lasted for 2 or 3 days, but afterwards Baba gave up his food and thereby grew weaker and weaker. On the 17th day, that is Tuesday, the 15th October 1918, Baba left his mortal coil and about 2:30 p.m. This sentence is in bracket. While Professor G.G. Narke's letter dated 5th November 1918 to Dadasaheb Khaparde published in Sai Leela magazine, page 78, first year. Bracket closed. 2 years before this, that is, in 1916, Baba gave an indication of his passing away, but nobody understood it then. It was as follows. On the Vijayadashmi, that is Dasara day, Baba all of a sudden got into wild rage in the evening when people were returning from Simolangan, that is, crossing the border or limits of the village. Taking off his headdress, kafni and langota, etc., he tore them and threw them in the dhuni before him. On being fed this offering, the fire in the dhuni began to burn brighter and Baba shone still brighter. He stood there stark naked and with his burning red eyes shouted, "You fellows, now have a look and decide finally whether I am a Muslim or a Hindu." Everybody was trembling with fear and none dared to approach Baba. After some time, Bhagoji Shinde, the Lipur devotee of Baba, went boldly near him and succeeded in tying a langota, that is waistband, round his waist and said, "Baba, what is all this? Today is the Simolangan, that is Dasara holiday. Baba, striking the ground with his satka, said, "This is my Simolangan." Baba did not cool down till 11 pm, and the people doubted whether the Saudi procession would ever take place that night. After an hour, Baba resumed his normal condition and, dressing himself as usual, attended the Saudi procession and described before. By this incident, Baba gave a suggestion that Dasara was the proper time for him to cross the border of life, but none understood its meaning then. Baba gave another indication also as follows, which is the second point of this chapter, that is averting death of Ramachandra and Tata Patil. Sometime after this, Ramachandra Patil became seriously ill. He suffered a lot. He tried all remedies but finding no relief. Despaired of his life and was waiting for the last moment. Then, one midnight, Baba suddenly stood near his bed. Patil held his feet and said, "I have lost all hopes of life. Please tell me definitely when I shall die." Merciful Baba said, "Don't be anxious. Your hundi, that is death warrant, has been withdrawn and you will soon recover. But I am afraid of Tata Patil. He will pass away on Vijayadashmi of Shaka 1814, that is 1918 AD. Do not divulge this to anybody nor to him, or he will be terribly frightened." Ramachandra Dada got well, but he felt nervous about Tata's life, for he knew that Baba's words was unalterable and that Tata would breathe his last within 2 years. He kept this secret, told it to none but to Bala Shimpi, that is a tailor only. Only these two persons, Ramachandra Dada and Bala Shimpi, were in fear and suspense regarding Tata's life. Ramchandra Dada soon left his bed and was on his legs. Time passed quickly. The month of Bhadrapad of Shaka 1840, that is 1918, was ending and Ashwin was approaching. True to Baba's words, Tata fell sick and was bedridden, and so he could not come for Baba's darshan. Baba was also down with fever. Tata had full faith in Baba. Tata's illness began to grow from bad to worse and he could not move at all, but always remembered Baba. The predicament of Baba began to grow equally worse. The day predicted, that is Vijayadashmi, was impending and both Ramachandra Dada and Bala Shimpi were terribly frightened about Tata, and their bodies trembling and perspiring with fear, thought that, as predicted by Baba, Tata's end was near. Vijayadashmi dawned and Tata's pulse began to beat very slow and he was expected to pass away shortly. But a curious thing happened. Tata remained, his death was averted and Baba passed away instead. It seemed as if there was an exchange. People said that Baba gave up his life for Tata. Why did he do so? He alone knows. His ways are inscrutable. It seems, however, that in this incident Baba gave a hint of his passing away, substituting Tata's name for his own. Next morning, that is 16th October, Baba appeared to Das Kanu at Pandharpur in his dream and said to him, "The masjid collapsed, all the oilmen and grocers of Shirdi harassed me a lot, so I leave the place. I therefore came to inform you here. Go there quickly and cover me with bakkal flowers." Das Kanu got the information also from Shirdi letters. So he came to Shirdi with his disciples and started bhajan and kirtan and sang the Lord names throughout the day before Baba's Samadhi. Himself weaving a beautiful garland of Lord Hari's name, he placed it on Baba's Samadhi and gave a mass feeding in Baba's name. Next point of this story is charity to Lakshmi Bai. Dasra or Vijayadashmi is regarded by all the Hindus as the most auspicious time, and it is befitting that Baba should choose this time for his crossing the borderline. He was ailing some days before this, but he was ever conscious internally. Just before the last moment, he sat up without anybody's aid and looked better. People thought that the danger had passed off and he was getting well. He knew that he was to pass away soon and therefore he wanted to give some money as charity to Lakshmi Bai Shinde. And the last point of this chapter is Baba providing all creatures. This Lakshmi Bai Shinde was a good and well-to-do woman. She was serving in the masjid day and night. Except Bhagat Marsapati Tatya and Lakshmibai, none was allowed to step in the masjid at night. Once, while Baba was sitting in the masjid with Tatya in the evening, Lakshmibai came and saluted Baba. Baba said to her, "Oh Lakshmi, I am very hungry." Off she went saying, "Baba, wait a bit, I return immediately with bread." She did return with bread and vegetables and placed same before Baba. He took it and gave it to a dog. Lakshmibai then asked, "What is this, Baba?" "I ran in haste, prepared bread with my own hands for you, and you threw it to a dog without eating a morsel of it." "You gave me trouble unnecessarily." Baba replied, "Why do you grieve for nothing? The appeasement of the dog hunger is the same as mine. The dog has a soul, the creatures may be different, but the hunger of all is the same, though some speak and others are dumb. Know for certain that he who feeds the hungry really serves me with food. Regard this as truth." This is an ordinary incident, but Baba thereby propounded a great spiritual truth and showed its practical application in daily life without hurting anybody's feeling. From this time onward, Lakshmibai began to offer him daily bread and milk with love and devotion. Baba accepted and ate it appreciatingly. He took a part of this and sent the remainder through Lakshmibai to Radha Krishna Mai, who always relished and ate Baba's remnant prasad. This bread story should not be considered as a digression. It shows how Sai Baba pervaded all the creatures and transcended them. He is omnipresent, birthless, deathless, and immortal. Baba remembered Lakshmibai's service. How could he forget her? Just before leaving his body, he put his hands in his pocket and gave her ₹5 and then ₹4, in all ₹9. This figure, that is 9, is indicative of the 9 types of devotion described in chapter number 21, or it may be the dakshina offered at the time of Simolangan. Lakshmibai was a well-to-down woman, and so she was not in want of any money. Baba might have suggested to her and brought to her notice the 9 characteristics of a good disciple mentioned in the 6th verse of chapter 10, Skandha 11 of Bhagavad, wherein first 5 and then 4 characteristics are mentioned in the first and second couplets. Baba's this gift of 9 she will remember ever. Being so watchful and conscious, he ordered them all to clear off. Kaka Sahib Dikshit, Bapu Sahib Putti and others were in the masjid anxiously waiting upon Baba, but he asked them to go to the Wada and returned after meals. They could not leave Baba's presence, nor could they disobey him. So, with heavy hearts and heavy feet, they went to the Wada. They knew that Baba's condition was very serious and that they could not leave him. They sat for meals, but their mind was elsewhere. It was with Baba. Before they finished, news came to them of Baba shedding the mortal coil. Leaving their dishes, they ran to the masjid and found that Baba rested finally on Bayaji's lap. He did not collapse on the ground, nor did he lie on his bed, but sitting quietly on his seat and doing charity with his own hand, left the mortal coil. Saints embody themselves and come into this world with a definite mission, and after that is fulfilled, they pass away as quietly as easily as they came. This chapter was really heart-touching, which we have ended up. Both to Sri Sai, peace to be all.